In Swahili, Mwalimu means teacher. It is therefore appropriate that the African people and most world statesmen address him as Mwalimu Nyerere. Julius Nyerere is among Africa's, indeed the world's, outstanding freedom fighters and leaders. The former school teacher who gave up teaching in 1955 to lead his country's struggle for independence freed Tanzania from colonial rule in 1961. In 1962, Nyerere became the first president of independent Tanzania. Though no longer president, as chairman of the all-powerful ruling party, Nyerere continues to be the major architect of modern Tanzania. He is also chairman of the South Commission and recipient of the Jawaharlal Nehru Award for Peace and Understanding. Chairman Nyerere invited members of the World Report team to fly with him in his special aircraft from the Tanzanian capital Dar es Salaam to Dodoma, 400 kilometers away, where he was to chair the monthly meeting of his party's Central Committee. The exclusive interview was conducted in Chamwino, a village outside Dodoma, where Mwalimu stays whenever he is in this part of Tanzania.
Last Sunday, looking for you in Dar es Salaam to work out the logistics of coming to Dodoma, which is 400 kilometers away, we ultimately found you in the local church praying. What role has religion played in your life, sir?
I don't know. It is very difficult to answer. To answer that question, how do I answer it? I'm a convert to Christianity. I was converted at the age of 12. So if I could, if it was possible to foresee what kind of life, what kind of life I would have led without being converted to Christianity, and compare that with what I have become as a Christian, if the two would be different, it would be easy to say, you see, if I had not become a Christian, I would have, this is the kind of life I would have led. But I became a Christian, and this is what I am. So it is not easy, really, to say how it has affected, but obviously a major religion like Christianity must affect one's life, although it's not easy to pinpoint and say it has affected my life this way. But I believe in Christianity. It is so you try to live according to its principles, and when you break them, you say, well, but I think I have broken the Christian principle there. But I can't say more than that.
Sir, at the Belgrade summit of the non-aligned, one school of thought was that in the fast-changing world, the non-aligned countries and the movement must shed its rhetoric on colonialism, imperialism, and so on, and join serious dialogue with the North for economic advance and dialogue among themselves. The other school of thought, of course, other view was that changing track at this point would be premature because, well, colonialism remains, I mean, so long as Namibia remains, and so on. What advice would you give? How would you intervene in this debate?
Well, unfortunately, I did intervene. And the colonialism part is not simply Namibia. I wish it were simply Namibia. The problem of power is a continuing problem, and it does not end when the countries have become independent. So I did say in my own intervention there, fortunately, they did allow me in my capacity as chairman of the South Commission to make a statement. And I suppose it was because of that mood that perhaps now we should be talking in terms of dialogue with the North rather than confrontation, as if we don't want dialogue with the North. In the 70s, you may remember, we did seek for dialogue with the North. We wanted to sit down with the North and talk together with the North about the economic situation as it is, as it does affect the countries of the South. So I did say, because of that mood, I did say in my own intervention, I don't know whether I can remember the the exact phrase, but I warned the non-aligned movement that they must not think that that imperialism is dead, because imperialism is not dead. And supposing the non-aligned movement, all of us in the South, said, imperialism is dead. Supposing we took that position. There is no imperialism. Imperialism has died. But that does not kill imperialism. Imperialism is a reality. It's a question of power. And the use of power to dominate others has not gone. It is still there. So if you like, yes, I would like to, I want to see genuine dialogue between the North and the South. And we should not have unnecessary confrontation with the North and the South. But the North is powerful. The North uses its power, economic power, technological power, sometimes military power, to dominate the South. And when you have that kind of situation, the situation itself has within it the confrontation. It's not a subjective thing. The situation itself has confrontation in it, just as colonialism had confrontation in it within the colonized and colonizer. And today, the situation where the North is powerful and uses that power to dominate, to exploit the South, that situation has domination, has confrontation in it. It's not something subjective.
So what is one to make of this word development? The purpose of life is the pursuit of happiness, or is the purpose of life the accumulation of wealth and the evolution of a consumer society? How would you sketch the sensible middle path?
Well, I don't know whether I could sketch a sensible middle path. Whether it is pursuit of happiness, I don't know. Because happiness becomes a matter of philosophy. I'm not quite sure that the millionaire is necessarily happier than the poor man. I don't know. This is a philosophical matter. But health is something that everybody desires. So people should be healthy. Whether that will make them happy, I don't know. But people should be healthy. Everybody wants a healthy body and a healthy mind, I suppose. Food. We need food. Whether food makes people happy, I don't know. But hunger does not make them happy. People have to have sufficient food to eat. Education, whether educated people are happier, whether I'm happier now because I'm educated than I would have been if I was an ignoramus, I didn't know anything. If I remained superstitious, I'd never heard about the word science. It's just possible. I might have been happier. It's not a question of being happy, but we can't have a community, an ignorant community, and keep education from the masses of the people because we thought ignorant people are more educated. And so this is it is development then is the process to help people to it's a bad thing to use development to define development, but to become their best. People must become their best. Everybody must get a chance to become their best. This is development.
What has been your experience as chairman of the South Commission these past 3 years? Do you despair? Are you hopeful?
I don't despair. It is true when you see the problems of the South, and I've seen them. I've been a Southerner always. I've led my country as first as leader of my own party, and then head of state of my own country for a long time. And I was involved in these problems of development. But I didn't get sufficient time. I did not have time. I traveled, but I did not travel as much as I have done during the last 2 years in the third world. So I've learned. So the first thing I've done is to learn, a great deal of learning. And I'm very grateful for the opportunity to enable me to learn. I see the immensity of the problems which the South face. First of all, just the problem. Even if the North was not there, it's just the South, and forget the North. And the South is there, and the South can develop itself without any problems from the North. It's an immense problem. It's still an immense problem. But the South has to develop itself in the shadow of the North. Two ways. One, they see the North and they say, we want to be like that. Now, I don't know whether they can be like that. So there is this question of the North is developed, we are not developed. To develop, we have to be like the North. This is an immense problem. So that's a problem. But the second one is the fact that the North will not allow them to develop. But I don't despair, because what I've seen in the North is the capacity to develop. If they will, then the South will simply say, to develop, first of all, we have to decolonize, decolonize the mind, as it were, also. The South has to have confidence in itself, must have this confidence in itself, and use its own resources to the maximum. They will develop. If they do that, they will develop.
Could you give an example? Could you elaborate on this, sir?
Well, let me give an example. India is not a developed country. But India has technology which ranges from biogas to nuclear energy and everything in between. So India has the technology for a third world. And if you forget the North, India is developed. If you forget the North, forget this business. So, the North is there, so India looks at the North and feels, oh gosh, how can we be like the North? But India has the means. And if you take that simply one line, energy, biogas, right to nuclear energy. So why shouldn't India look at India? So that its major strategy is to look at India. Not look at anybody else. And there will be things outside India which they need. But India's strategy for development should be India. We have to depend upon India to develop. This is what I mean. The other thing is the South. The South has Tanzania's, but it has India's, it has China's, it has Brazil's. And when you take these countries as a totality, they share this weakness. They share the incapacity to influence the decisions of the world, which affect billions of people. We share that. And therefore we are together. And India, in that sense, India and Tanzania, no difference. We are the same. So why don't we come together? Another level of self-reliance. Because if you look at them all, they have almost all we need. Almost all we need to get out of this weakness. So why do we enhance our own weakness by looking outside the South, even for things where we don't have to look outside the South, because the South is there. This is what I mean.
Right, but still the problem is that various countries in the South, countries in the Arab world, countries elsewhere, where they will not look to India, they will not look to China, they will continue to look Japanese technology, German technology, and American technology, and so on. So that the problem remains. How do you bring about this consensus?
The problem remains, yes, it's true. One is habit. I mean, we do that also in Tanzania, and we will go out to the north for technology which is around in the south. Actually, we'll go out to outside Tanzania for technology which is available in Tanzania. One is habit. One I say is a mentality. Your neighbor's lawn is always greener than your own, and your own, and so forth. And so we have to break that habit, and it takes time to break that habit. I mean, I was born under colonialism. I grew up under colonialism. The people did not really want colonialism. The people of Tanzania did not really want to remain colonial. But they were there. Colonialism was a reality, and they were victims of colonialism. And so you had to start the process of decolonization. You had to say, we can't continue to live under this. And when we did that, there were people amongst ourselves who thought this was absurd. How could you do it? You people, you don't have the technology, you don't have the power. I suppose when Gandhi started, people must say, how can you get rid of the empire? You have nothing, and so forth. So it's a process. But that process has to start, and I'm saying the South can do that. It's not only the Arab countries, it's all of us, including Tanzania. We have this mentality. We will not enhance our own capacity. We will weaken our own capacity and enhance the capacity of the North to dominate us, and this is wrong.
When elephants fight,
it is the grass that suffers.
When elephants make love, it also ruins. It is also the grass that suffers. Now, this picturesque phrase was used just the other day by one of your leaders. Do you fancy this metaphor for the relationship between the superpowers at the moment?
Well, first of all, may I tell you the story about that metaphor?
Right.
In 1973, the Commonwealth met in Ottawa. No, the Commonwealth met in Ottawa.
Right.
And that was the period when the North was talking about détente, and Brezhnev was pushing for détente, and the Northwest had accepted this idea. And in Ottawa, the Prime Minister of Great Britain, Teddy Heath at that time, was explaining the importance of this, the importance of détente. And it took a long time to explain. And why he was taking such a long time to explain was that the Prime Minister of Singapore was not really, didn't think there was very much in this. This was the West abandoning leaving the Far East, and he didn't like this idea at all. And he was taking a lot of time to explain the importance of this. And I thought, I must reassure this man. Why does he take such a long time to explain détente? So I said, Mr. Prime Minister, let me assure you, why do you take such a long time? We don't want trouble between the superpowers. What good does it do? In Swahili there is a saying, in Swahili, when the elephants fight, it is the grass that suffers. And Lee Kuan Yew is a very intelligent person and very quick. He said, when the elephants make love, it is the grass that suffers. that was Lee Kuan Yew. It was not mine. It was a retort from Lee Kuan Yew.
I see. So the point is, is this an accurate description of the possibility?
I'm afraid, you have to think about that, because we in Africa have suffered both. The elephants have fought in Africa, and we suffered when the elephants were actually fighting in Africa. But the elephants made love about Africa also, And the partition of Africa was actually a making of love. They met in Berlin, and they were not fighting in Berlin at all. They met in Berlin in 1884 to partition Africa without fighting. And so, there is some truth in all these statements. There is an element of truth, and I think what people are trying to say is, yes, we would like the Northeast and the Northwest to stop their tensions, because that tensions now between the East and the West can be very dangerous to everybody, including the South. So we should welcome this, the making of love between the Northeast and the Northwest. But of course, you do say the North is very powerful. Supposing the North was to make love simply to dominate the South, well, I mean, this we have to say. What does this mean to us? What does it mean to us? It can mean peace, yes, but peace for what? Because peace is a product. I keep repeating this. Peace is a product of justice.
How do you read the processes of perestroika and glasnost initiated by Mikhail Gorbachev in the Soviet Union? Do you see these processes with a degree of hope, or as a wise statesman, are you apprehensive?
What is happening, what President Gorbachev have ushered into the present time, first of all, is the relation between East and West. And this is clear, and I think this is a good development. I think everybody of goodwill should encourage that, because it's a positive thing. Any kind of war now between the superpowers is unacceptable to everybody. So that is a trend which is fine. But the internal and what is happening internally, first of all, let me say I don't know what the kind of trend that is taking place in Eastern Europe. I can't say I understand what is going on, but let me say this. If the Soviet Union, the leadership, is saying, how can you have socialism without democracy? How can you call this democracy? How can you pretend that this is democracy? It's not possible to have socialism without freedom. Socialism should be the acme of freedom, not its opposite. Now, if perestroika or glasnost or whatever it is, I don't understand this. If the changes are intended to answer this question in a positive manner, I think that should be encouraged by every socialist, everywhere. Every socialist. I'm a socialist, and I don't want to be told, you people, what kind of socialism is this? And socialism should really mean freedom. If these are the changes which are taking place in the East, they're freeing socialism. They're making socialism a free socialism. They're making socialism with a human face. And it's absurd that socialism should have anything but a human face. It is really ridiculous. Why should socialism have anything other than a human face? It is capitalism which should have an inhuman face, not socialism. So if that is what the change is intended to do, that should be welcomed. But there are those who believe, and especially in the West, those who believe what is happening in the West, in the East, is that the East is abandoning socialism. Now, if that were to be true, then as a socialist I would be very apprehensive. But if the idea is to free socialism from the strictures of Stalinism, then I'd feel quite happy.
Now, the changes in the Soviet Union and in China, they do indicate that state control of the economy has not been good for the generation of wealth. And do you go along with that at least?
It's one thing to say if you have too much control, you reach a stage where if you have too much control, there is a stage where too much control becomes negative. So it's just possible. The Soviet Union has reached a position where if you don't unleash the creativity of the population, you constrain development. And therefore now it is necessary to lessen control, to lessen central control. That could be true. But it is not necessarily true to say if you did not have the previous control, you would have reached that position. You can never be sure that these countries would have, that the Soviet Union would by now be a superpower. I don't know, because really this is the would have been of history, and would have been is absurd. So it is absurd for the Soviet Union if the leadership says we have to change. They must change now, because they have reached a stage of development. They're a superpower. They've reached a stage of development. It's no use going on pretending to live like 1940 or 1930, because this is, for the Soviet Union, it's not 1930 or 1940 or even 1960. They've reached a stage now they have to change and modernize themselves. But would have they, we don't know, they would have been. Would they have been a superpower if they did not have some of the controls, which we are now saying, no, these controls are now wrong, these controls must go? Would they have been in that position? I don't know. This is the would have been of history. What would the Soviet Union would have been if they did not take the line which they took? I don't know. How can anybody answer that?
China, same thing about China. They have also...
Would China, if China won its central position, China became China, really, real China, I'm told, I don't know, I'm not such a historian, but I'm told China had its first central authority since 1949. Its first central authority. China has a long history, yes, and there was always China, you know, but it never really had a central authority controlling the whole of China. You had warlords all over, and an emperor claiming to be the emperor over all China, but really with warlords all over. And China, this China we are talking today, is for a short time, very short time, tremendous central control. I don't know whether I don't know whether if China had been loose, we would be talking about China today.
Tanzania and other African states are single-party states. Are you opposed to a multi-party system for developing countries? Do you think a multi-party system can be inaugurated in a country like Tanzania?
Oh yes. Oh yes, I did, my colleagues and myself, we established a single party system here, not from philosophy. I'm not committed to a single party as a philosophical tenet at all. For us it was a practical thing. First of all, we did not have another party, and I was not going to create another party in order to please some people in the Western world that I couldn't have a democratic government without a second party. Where was I going to get a second party? I didn't have it. Our first elections, we used to have one party, and we had no elections in a sense, because our party used to be returned unopposed, no elections, because there was no other party. And so we established a single party by law. But since then, I was very pleased that we were a single party. Because many of these nations, India is lucky, but many of these nations now who preached to us about multi-parties in 1990, 1989, they were not built by multi-parties. They are monarchies, many of these countries. They were built as nations. They are not built on a basis of a multi-party system. They were built by families until they became nations.
In Belgrade, yourself, Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi and others discussed various ways in which you could assist the Namibian election process. What are the hurdles that you foresee where this kind of help is required?
First of all, the political hurdles. We must not trust the South Africans. The South Africans have reached this position under pressure. They never wanted to leave Namibia. Even now, I'm not sure. All of us must watch them together. There are some people who simply want, they say, watch SWAPO. It's not SWAPO you want to watch, because SWAPO want free elections. They know they will win. If you have free elections, they know they will win. And they want the independence of their own country.
The Commonwealth Summit is round the corner in October in Kuala Lumpur, where South Africa will presumably once again be center stage. What course of action do you recommend to get Mrs. Thatcher in line somewhere?
It would be, I can't try to give advice to anybody to get Mrs. Thatcher in line, because nobody can get Mrs. Thatcher in line except Mrs. Thatcher. So I don't think that is possible. But seriously, I think Mrs. Thatcher is opposed to sanctions. totally opposed to sanctions. And she's going to go to Kuala Lumpur saying no sanctions, and she will produce all sorts of reasons. And one of the reasons she's going to produce is that there is the clerk, and the clerk now allows the processions to take place, so give him a chance. I think she would probably bring that kind of argument. And I don't believe in this. I think the Commonwealth countries must watch out. Really, they've got to be very careful. I said about Namibia, the South Africans did not want to leave Namibia. And even now, I'm not sure they will leave. If they leave, they will leave because of the pressures. The South Africans don't want to change apartheid. They have not become Paul, seeing the light going on the way to Damascus at all. If there are signs of change in South Africa, it's because of the pressures, the internal pressures and the international pressures. If you relax those pressures, they will relax in comfort in South Africa. So those who want change in South Africa must continue the pressures. The internal pressures must continue and the external pressures must continue. Don't relax those pressures. Even Mrs. Thatcher really must be told, please, don't relax pressures.
India gained independence in 1947. You gave up teaching in 1953 to take up public work in Tanzania, then Tanganyika. Your freedom struggle was non-violent, as indeed was ours. Was Mahatma Gandhi or our freedom struggle something of an inspiration for you?
Yes, I was quite aware of the fact that the Indian liberation movement had succeeded on a philosophy of non-violence. I was quite aware of that and that it could be used. And I was determined, if it was possible, I was absolutely determined that we could win our independence non-violently. But I am not a non-violent person, philosophically, at all. Gandhi was non-violent philosophically. I was non-violent politically. There was no need. If there is no need to be violent, why be violent? If it was possible to organize ourselves politically and achieve independence without shedding blood, why shed blood? And we did succeed.
What recollections do you have of Indian leaders that you've met in your innings as president and now as chairman of the party?
Well, the Indian leaders I know are really the Gandhis, these Gandhis, Mrs. Gandhi and Rajiv. Nehru I met for a very short time, very short. People believe because I achieved independence while he was Prime Minister of India that I must have met him at Commonwealth meetings. I didn't, because the one Commonwealth meeting which we went to, I had resigned. I was not in the government. But I had met him. I met him only once before my country became independent. And it's very interesting. I must tell you what he told me. I had gone to the United Nations as a petitioner. This country was a trust territory under the United Nations, and I was there as a petitioner. Nehru visited the United Nations when we were there. And we were lined up with people from the colonies. We were lined up to meet him. And he came, reached me, and I was introduced to him. And he said to me, I remember the exact words, "Don't make the mistake we made in India. Take what you can get." That was Nehru's advice to me.
Take what you can get, meaning what?
Yes, I understood it because I was a teacher. I used to teach colonial history, and I knew the Indian National Congress was rather purist. They were very purist. They wanted to jump from colonialism to independence without any stages. And I felt, although I did not ask him a question, I felt that is what he meant, that if you can reach independence step by step, do it. That is the way I interpreted his, take what you can get.
No, I can't resist asking this question I ask many statesmen. Which is the most exciting last book that you have read? Do you get time to read?
I get time to read. I shouldn't tell you what books I am reading now. But I should say, do you want me to tell you what a book I'm reading now?
Right.
And this is going to be my last answer?
Yes, yes.
I'm reading Machiavelli.